Great. So thank you very much for that, kiddo. Yeah, lots of ways to get involved. And yeah, like you said, tomorrow there's a festival day out at our new retreat center, which is in the process of being built, but it's built enough to have a festival there, obviously. And yeah, so you can make your way there if you want. You can talk to Kirill afterwards or someone else who looks competent, like he says. Yeah, so this festival is well, it's called Triratna Day. Triratna is the name of our particular order and movement, yeah? Triratna, basically, Triratna means 3 jewels, yeah? It's one of the, it's the kind of, it's super important for Buddhists. The 3 jewels are basically the Buddha, the ideal of enlightenment, the Dharma, the teachings, and the Sangha, the spiritual community, yeah? They're the 3 kind of, they're the main central axis point for every Buddhist, yeah? And that's what this order and movement is called. It's called Triratna. So we celebrate this every year, yeah? So it was founded in 1967 in London by a man called Sangharakshita, and you could say it's a new tradition, yeah? It started in 1967, but its roots go back and back into the mist of time, because the way Buddhism is, the way it travels is person to person, yeah? So although this tradition was founded in 1967 in London, it can only really happen via an unbroken chain, I would say of friendships on one level, but certainly of teacher-disciple relationships, yeah? And he had some extraordinary teachers, Sangharakshita, and I think they were very keen on him coming back in the 1960s to communicate Buddhism, because he was from London originally, he was from the West, and they obviously had faith in him that he would do a good job at coming back and communicating the Dharma, and that's why we have this order and this movement. So it's kind of grown and flourished, I would say, from that point. Yeah, and it's quite interesting because I think it's debatable, but we seem to live in a fairly conservative period for the past, I would say, a couple of decades. It's very materialistic, very kind of mortgages and technology and da-da-da-da-da-da. And I think it was Sangharakshita himself said if it hadn't have happened in the 1960s, it would never have happened. There was a small chink, a small opening in the West, and as we know, so much stuff happened, yeah? One of them being basically Buddhism arrived here and took root, yeah? So, well, maybe there's a couple of ways Buddhism spreads. I guess or develops in one way. You have, you could say, missionary activity, if you want to call it that. So you've had these great kingdoms, yeah, in India and other places, and someone has decided to send out missionaries to spread the Dharma, yeah. So it can travel in that way. It can also travel where you have an existing tradition, and perhaps it goes a bit stale, yeah. But perhaps it becomes a bit formalistic, a bit formulaic, a bit like conventional religion, and the spirit starts to get lost, and some people within that tradition decide to break away and reignite Buddhism, yeah, and that has happened a lot. You could say it's had 3 main phases over the last 2,500 years, but it's happened fairly regularly where people have decided that this needs to happen. And I'm not sure where our tradition lies, but probably on the second one more than the first one, yeah. So yeah, I just thought it's quite interesting. There's pros and cons of being a new-ish tradition, yeah. The cons, maybe one of them is because one's not long established, you don't have the kind of weight of religious authority that some people seem to need, you know. It's like they need to know that it has this kind of weight behind it, which I would say it does, but it's not in an obvious, it seems to, I might be wrong here, but it seems to be perhaps more important for men, but I'm not sure about that. It seems to be my observation. But yeah, so a con is sometimes people, in order to feel like it's the real thing, they need to have this kind of weight. A few disagreements, people aren't sure here, doesn't matter, but there seems to be a necessity for some kind of weight in order to trust it, yeah. Weight of authority, history, this kind of thing, yeah. So that's one thing, but we'll get into that. The second thing, I would say one con is that we are because we're early on, we're at the early stages with art as well. Yeah. So there's a few. It's quite a rare combination, especially in this day and age, because we don't have a traditional culture, to have someone who is a genuinely practicing Buddhist in the strongest sense, and also an artist that can create things technically. Yeah. So there's something going on with the lighting here. Is this good? You happy with this? I'll carry on. Thank you. So yeah, so that's another thing. You know, there's some extraordinary artists involved in this tradition, working very hard. But yeah, that's another thing, maybe a con, you might say. Maybe the last thing is, but maybe this goes for every tradition, lots of mistakes get made, yeah? Which is also part of its dynamism. You try new things, especially in the 60s, 70s, 80s perhaps, there's like a lot of mistakes get made. But that's all part of it as well. And yeah, for some people it's important. They have a whole image of what a Buddhist should look like. Yeah, I certainly did. For me, it was a bit. Some people really inspired by the robes and the whole look. Yeah, for me, I found that a bit of a turn off. But it's quite interesting. I was thinking my first impression of coming into a Triratna center, however many years ago, I thought, wow, they look pretty scruffy. They're like, it was a kind of charity shop vibe, but there's more to it. More to it. The pros, I would say, being a new tradition, is we are actually in a very dynamic and creative period with Buddhism in the modern world. That's just a fact. We have to be. Yeah. So there's an energy to it and a creativity to it, which, well, it's a good time. I sometimes think, wow, this is a good time to be involved. It's a bit like, wow, how are we doing this? But it's also very alive. Yeah. I'd say the second pro is that there's a certain level of self-awareness. Yeah, there's a certain level of self-awareness within, I would say, particularly within this tradition. Probably because you don't have a whole weight of history behind you to just kind of lean back on. You're kind of aware of what you're doing. Yeah, and it has to engage with the society around it. That's the whole point. And well, it's real. That's the strange thing. I think we're in such a strange, untraditional time. That you kind of just bumble. I kind of bumbled in. Even I asked for ordination. I kind of didn't quite stumble into that, but you kind of go along. But it was at my ordination. I won't go into all that. But there's a whole ritual element where it felt like I got hit by a train. It was like a realization. Oh, this is real, and this chain of friendships and teachings goes back and back and back into the mist of time. And that was a very sobering experience for me. Yeah. Okay, that's a little preamble. I thought in a way to bring this particular tradition to life a bit, or doesn't matter celebrate, but bring it to life. There's what are called the 6 distinct emphases. There's a bit of jargon today, like I said in the WhatsApp group, but we're going to try and just cut through the jargon very quickly. Yeah. So this particular order and movement has 6 distinct things that you might highlight, yeah, that you might emphasize, maybe values, underlining. An emphasis, if you don't know what that means, or emphases, is it's like something important, yeah, something not about unique but important. Blimey. Okay, so the first one, I'm not going to. They come in different orders, but they're the same 6, yeah. So within Triratna. One of the distinct emphases is this term going for refuge. Yeah, if you're interested in Buddhism, you will need to know this term. It's like there's not much jargon or much terminology, but going for refuge to the 3 jewels, to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Going for refuge is the key term. And if you want to ask yourself if something is Buddhism or if it really is Buddhism. Well, this is the same question that Sangharakshita, who founded this particular movement and order, asked himself. What is Buddhism? Yeah, he was in the East for 20 years as a monk. He had Theravadan teachers, you know, like a Sri Lankan, Tibetan, Chinese. So different, so many different expressions of Buddhism. Yeah, but all characterized by the same atmosphere, the same something, yeah? So he asked himself, what is it? What is Buddhism then? And he came to realize it's this business of going for refuge, which is from the Buddha himself. Yeah, so going for refuge, basically, the Buddha saw that. He left his regular life, you might say, in search of answers, yeah, to suffering, and basically, we're all looking for a refuge. We're all looking for safety. It's a natural thing. Every animal does it. Yeah, they're looking for a nest. They want to be safe in this world. And the Buddha realized that the only real source of safety and security is what we call enlightenment, yeah, which I'll get into in a minute. So we go for refuge. We try and look for safety in all kinds of things, don't we? We try and look in this world. It's a scary world. It can be a dangerous place. We're looking for security on all sorts of levels. So in a way, where are we looking for our refuge normally? Normally we're looking for it in things like money, sex appeal, status, intelligence. What else have we got here? Muscle, youth, technology, being cool. If that's the thing, I don't know. That'll do. Yeah. So there's all sorts of things we're looking for. Yeah. We take all these things, we obsess about them, we give our lives to these things, these refuges. Yeah. We try and build a castle, but essentially the Buddha saw it's a sand castle, and in the end, it doesn't keep you safe, and it can never keep you safe. In fact, sometimes it just causes you more problems. Yeah. So. The real refuge the Buddha saw is enlightenment, yeah? I always find it difficult talking about enlightenment because you can talk about it in a very heady, clever, technical sense. Oh, everything arises on conditions and it's not really a thing, and it's just everything is supported by loads of other conditions, and this kind of thing we call a thing emerges and then disintegrates. And so that frees. It's just never satisfactory for me. I'm just not in the mood today, so I thought I'd give you some qualities that would be observable. If you saw someone who was enlightened or a Buddha, perhaps, you'd say, "Oh, there's something going on with this person's consciousness that means they behave in this way." So I just thought a few things came to mind. Yeah, fearlessness is primary. Yeah, is you have the kind of consciousness where there's nothing to defend anymore. Yeah. Doesn't mean you're vegetable, you're not like limp, but there's nothing to defend, yeah? So on that note, creativity, infinitely creative. Another one, almost unimaginable, but love, yeah? For all beings, the same love that a mother experiences for their child, but for everybody and everything, yeah? Yeah? Not as in a sentimental way, as a real strong way, yeah? Knowledge and wisdom, someone who actually knows how things are, how things actually work, yeah? I don't want to go there. But yeah, an embodiment of this different state of consciousness. Like I say, we live in a very conservative time now, we're very materialistic, we have these kind of mortgage, technology minds, we're like, this is the way the world is, slightly robotic. But what we're talking about is an utterly different state of consciousness, yeah? A liberated state, someone who's actually liberated and free, and all kind of the world will do what the world does, but a Buddha is free. And that's the whole point of Buddhism, yeah? That's the safety. It's not like you find yourself a castle and then you're safe in the castle. Your mind, your consciousness is different, yeah? You no longer suffer in the same way. And I'm not even going to compact it. It's said to be beyond words. Yeah. So this is the refuge. Yeah. This is essentially the refuge. And the word "going" is important. It's active. We're not passive in this. We're going towards this. We're putting our boots on, so to speak. It's not just a nice idea. We're actually doing something about it. Yeah. So going for refuge basically means practicing Buddhism with integrity. Yeah. Let me see. So I'm not going to say too much about what this going looks like. This going can sometimes look like a process of self-development, yeah, which is very important. You develop certain qualities. Sometimes you might be aware you need to surrender a bit. Yeah, this is also an action. Yeah, you surrender to something higher, or you surrender to something deeper, or you allow something to emerge. But you're engaged. The main point is you're there. Yeah, you're going. You're there. You're engaged. Yeah, you're engaged, and you have the refuge in your heart, and you're working with it. Yeah? So this is the first emphasis of this particular tradition. Let me just read a short quote from the Dhammapada. So Dhammapada is probably near enough to the Buddha, as close as we're going to get to the Buddha's words. Yeah. So he says, "Many people, out of fear, flee for refuge to sacred hills, woods, groves, trees, and shrines. In reality, this is not a safe refuge. In reality, this is not the best refuge. Fleeing to such a refuge, one is not released from all suffering. He who goes for refuge to the enlightened one, to the truth, to the spiritual community, and who sees with perfect wisdom the four Aryan truths, namely suffering, the origin of suffering, the passing beyond suffering, and the Aryan eightfold way leading to the pacification of suffering, for him this is a safe refuge. For him this is the best refuge. Having gone to such a refuge, one is released from all suffering." Okay. Yeah, I think that would do. Yeah, so like I say, going for refuge, if you want to know, if you want to remember a kind of phrase out of Buddhism, going for refuge is probably the key one to know. Sounds a bit technical, but it's important. Okay, the second one, the second distinct emphasis is a unified order. Yeah. So this particular order is neither a monastic order. Yeah. So we're not monks and nuns, but it's not a lay order either. Meaning it's not just like a part-time hobby for people where they just kind of dip in and do a bit of Buddhism and then get on with the rest of their life, yeah? I think this came about in a way because Sangharakshita had seen some of the problems that develop when you have a monastic situation. I'm not saying monastic situations are bad. I think they're very good. You know, they can be very good. But if that's the only model you have, what can happen is you have monks that are sometimes religious figures or it's their job, and people offer them offerings. That's all good. But what can happen is you just end up with kind of the worst of both worlds. So people don't really practice themselves. They kind of make offerings to the monks who are supposed to practice. Some of the monks are just sitting around just because that's what they're doing, they're monks. And you can end up with quite a dead or deadening situation. Yeah? And I'm certainly not saying this is in all cases, but this can happen. And anyway, I think Sangharakshita's main inspiration was the Buddha's own time, because in the Buddha's time, the Buddha just had followers. Yeah? Some of his followers were with him in the forests, meditating, maybe a more monkish type existence. Some of his followers were more in the household, you know, with families and businesses. But no one got off lightly. Yeah? It wasn't like, oh yeah, you've got a business of you family, you just take it easy. Everyone was engaged, and that's the whole point of this order. Yeah, there's whatever he has a saying: lifestyle commitment is primary, lifestyle is secondary. Yeah, doesn't mean your lifestyle is unimportant, but basically your commitment is the prime thing. And to be honest, I was thinking recently, it's quite a tough call. Yeah, I kind of thought, we've kind of got it easy. And that's because I was a bit stupid, because I was kind of thinking, we're slightly, in my mind, slightly leaning to the lay side. So we just have a regular nice life, do a bit of Buddhism, yeah. And then not so long ago, unfortunately, a bit of shocker, I realized this is actually quite tough. This is like, because you're kind of in the city and you're also fully practicing. Yeah, it's not a hobby. So it's like, it can be a challenge, but, and it's on you to find your, keep finding your inspiration, yeah, which then keeps it real, keeps it alive. But that's what this order is like, yeah. No one's ordination is higher than anyone else's ordination. Once you've been ordained, that's it, yeah. And again, this might sound normal to you in Berlin. I don't know where you come from. But there's no distinction between men and women's ordinations. Yeah, in a lot of Buddhist countries, it's happened that you basically have men that are ordained and women are not. So there's no nuns, there's just monks. And this order has a completely equal ordination, yeah? And I think that was deliberate as well. And interestingly enough, the first person to be ordained in 1967 was a lady called Sarah Boyne, who became Sujata, yeah? Now, there's this funny newspaper clip from 1967 in London which said, housewife Sarah Boyne becomes... I thought, wow, this is crazy. So she was the first person to be ordained, and I think that's significant. I can't imagine Sangharakshita to deliberately ordained a woman to make a statement. I imagine he just followed tradition in terms of age. Yeah, probably like who was the eldest got ordained first. He was probably the eldest, and which I thought was very bold on his part as well. You're beginning a new Buddhist order. Maybe you'd like all your other Buddhist tradition friends to be happy with you. And there you go and start doing things that are kind of might get people's backs up, or people think, well, this is a bit strange. So we have a unified order, yeah? It's important to say this, that it's not Buddhism light, yeah? I think just because sometimes we're a bit scruffy and don't have nice robes, or we do actually, but not all the time, it's not Buddhism light. And I was thinking in terms of the situation we're in, there's a friend of the centre, Chairman Padmabhadra, and he used to say to me a few times when I was getting stressed about living in the city and practicing and everything, he used to quote Hakuin, who's a 17th century Zen master and poet, and he said something along the lines of the lotus born in the fire is superior to the lotus born in the pond. Is that right? I look at Dharmasara, he's our... So I took that on. I thought, in a way, there's something to it. It can burn. It can be difficult. Yeah. So yeah. So there's no hierarchy of ordination. Yeah. It's a flat ordination. What am I talking about? It's an ordination, and you participate with intensity. Yeah, as much as you can. So there's no hierarchy. It's also important to keep this in mind for those of you who have been coming for a long time and meditating, because we can do this without even realizing. We can find a new groovy meditation practice and be like, well, I think you're probably not in this state of consciousness, and you start kind of making a hierarchy out of your kind of meditation experience. Yeah. So we don't need to do that as if it's more esoteric, it's deeper. Any meditation practice that you apply yourself to fully will bear fruit, yeah, essentially, and it's a long road. Okay, so that's the second distinctive emphasis, yeah? So we have a unified order. The third one, wow, these words are a mouthful even for me, and I'm English, but ecumenical. So ecumenical Buddhism, basically non-sectarian. Ecumenical Buddhism, I think it basically means whatever works. Now this might sound a bit random, but I'll try and explain this. Whatever works from a tradition that we can apply to us here and now in Berlin in 2025, yeah? But it's not just some random pick and mix thing where you just like have a bit of this and you fancy a bit of that. There's a whole process of how we integrate and incorporate practices. But, well, Sangharakshita came back to the West in the 1960s. He was in London. And some practices in some places that would work, I think are just inappropriate. So London in the 60s was very grey and dirty and still bits destroyed from the war, I think. I don't know. I don't want to be rude. I don't know when you were born. 53. 53, okay. So we played in bomb sites. No, UK, so they were still bomb sites, probably like here, yeah? And there was smog everywhere, and people probably still wore bowler hats to work on the underground, and everything was grey. A lot of hard times, yeah? I don't mean to paint...
The smog you could see about 2.5 meters.
So you could see 2.5 meters ahead of you, yeah? What would probably not be appropriate at that point would be then to get a load of people who didn't know what Buddhism was to say, right, let's reflect on the decomposition of a corpse. So imagine a dead body, and imagine it all decomposing, that's impermanence. Yeah, they do. That's a practice. So that would be inappropriate. Yeah, to have a load of people that are already reeling from a war to start. But what he did see was, well, things like the metta bhavana is super important. Cultivating loving kindness. Yeah. There's loads of, like a color. The sadhana practices we do. These visualization practices. They're appropriate. The mindfulness of breathing is appropriate. The deeper you get into, you start having beautiful experiences. They start loosening up your fixed, rigid states of mind. Your perception is clearer. They're all appropriate practices. Yeah. I think in a way we've got quite enough deconstruction going on. I read Sartre. How do you say? Nausea? I can't remember. Anyway, he's an existentialist. I read him when I was about 25 and I got so depressed. But some people think, oh, that's Buddhism. Yeah, a chair's not really a chair, it's all made of parts. And so we've got enough deconstruction. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent. I think the reason also for this kind of, the reason for this ecumenical Buddhism is Sangharakshita's journey himself, yeah? So he had different teachers that taught him different things that he actually practiced for long periods of time and understood. So that's why we have the kind of practices and the shape we have and the influences is partially because of his journey, yeah? So he had a journey, he had different teachers, and it has an integrity. That's what I'm saying. Blimey, okay. Yeah, maybe in the West it's good. To be honest, I often think Lala Triratna had I don't know if he still says these things, but just focus on the good, basically. Focus on practicing with some intensity, the positive, and in a sense you will purify yourself out of that anyway. All the negative stuff will start manifesting itself and you'll be like, I need to get rid of this, I want to stop doing this stuff. But you don't have to emphasize the negative, if you know what I'm saying. You can kind of really put some energy behind your friendships, your study, your meditation, and by default it starts to show up the things that you're not happy with. You know what I mean? It's an emphasis, yeah? Mm-hmm. All right, we're flying through this, good. Yeah. So, that's the third one. Ecumenical Buddhism, yeah? Which does relate to the fourth one. So, the fourth one is Triratna's emphasis on the arts, yeah? And beauty, you might say, eros, but on the arts. And, I was in a urology waiting room on Monday, and it could have been a very unpleasant experience, but they had some nice paintings. And I thought, because I was thinking about this talk, I thought, if these paintings weren't here, and I'm in some place in wherever it was, with this grey floor, this could be quite an unpleasant experience, but somehow it kind of sensitized me and humanized the situation. And they had loads of paintings everywhere, and I thought, yeah, art is very important. And I can't remember who it was. There was a famous painter in the late 19th century in Paris. Someone will probably know here. But where he advised poor people to steal adverts, steal posters off the street and bring them into their homes because they didn't have any colour in their homes. It was just like grey and brown and dirty. So people would steal these like super colourful posters and put them in their living spaces to get some kind of life into them. Anyway, so art is important. Well, by definition, art expands your consciousness, doesn't it? It kind of keeps you absorbed. There's an absorption there. Your consciousness becomes more subtle. You get exposed to higher ideas, ideals. Yeah, and it's an expansive state. And I would say I got a cultural education in Triratna. Yeah, a kind of broad cultural education, and I've been exposed to all sorts of different art forms that I would never have. So, for example, Dharmasara here is very into opera. He's like super opera fanatic. And he took me to Tristan and Isolde by Wagner, yeah? I probably wouldn't have gone by myself, but it was amazing. Like by the end of it, I would say I had a genuinely transcendental experience. He explained to me that the first 4 hours are not pain, but the first 4 hours are like painful, yeah? And that's deliberate. They beat you up with the sound, and you go, oh my God, it's like, my back hurts. But then the last 5 minutes, we're just like, no, but this is like meditation sometimes. It's like meditation sometimes. You're in a lot of pain, you're like, I hate this stupid guy, I wish he'd stop talking, I want to leave. And then all of a sudden you're just like, oh, the pain. And you're in a completely transcendent state of consciousness, yeah? The same thing happened with the opera. And it was amazing. We both left completely like, there was someone else visiting from London, from another Buddhist center, like we bumped into them, and none of us could talk, yeah? It was crazy. So things like that. And then there's another guy, he's not here, Johannes, he does contemporary dance. He took me to some contemporary dance thing, and it was like, wow, this is a whole new language. For half an hour, I literally understood what they were saying with their dancing, yeah? And also, our own Sangharakshita, he wrote a lot of poetry, and he's very much into poetry. And I think that's important when looking at Buddhism, because you can approach Buddhism from a very dry, technical perspective, you know, which for some people works. I'm not going to deny that. That's great. If you're technically minded and you like to go through the 8 dhyanas with a spanner and do, I don't know, all this, it works for some people. I shouldn't be rude, yeah? They really... But poetry is probably closer to the kind of language we need, yeah? It's like indeterminate meaning, but definite meaning, yeah? When when you're meditating, for example, and you hit some kind of exalted states or deeper states, you couldn't explain them to anybody. You really, and it's depressing when you try. You hear these words coming out of your mouth, and they're like looking at you like when you're telling someone your dream, and they're like, and you're like, I've just given away my gold here. I just had like an extraordinary experience, and I've given away all my gold, yeah? So poetry helps you, I think, to respect that in a way, yeah? Yeah. And also story, also literature, I remember I was on a train in the UK, and there was an old lady there with War and Peace, yeah? And I just finished reading War and Peace, and I said to her, oh yeah, it's fantastic, isn't it? She said, yeah, I read it every year. I was like, wow. She read, and I thought, well, that's it. I mean, we just laughed, but what are we watching on Netflix? Complete rubbish. But anyway, so War and Peace, that was like her spiritual text or her guide in life, yeah? So there's so much insight that can be had in the arts that is incredibly helpful. Just one passage from War and Peace, or not one passage, one part. I remember, reading it, and I just thought, how does Tolstoy know this? He's talking about a young man who's been injured in war, and he's basically dying. I think his mum's there, and his wife is there. And the way he describes it, it's like, whoa, it's incredible. Something along the lines of, this young man's got like not long to go. He's about to leave this world. And he looks at his wife who's drinking water, and it doesn't make sense to him. He just can't understand. He's like, oh, what's this? It's like he's drifting from life. So things like drinking water become a bit weird. Be like, oh, interesting, because he's not doing that anymore and won't do that again. I thought, how does he know that? I read that and I instinctively thought, yeah, that's true. There's something along that time. So anyway, so there's an emphasis on the arts, yeah, which is enlivening. And important. It's important to have your consciousness vibrant when you're approaching Buddhism, and just as a community, yeah, it's important. So there's an emphasis on the arts. Number 5. I never do talks like this. I feel it's like the Old Testament. Anyway, number 5. Right livelihood. Yeah, another term. Don't worry. Right livelihood basically means working an ethical job, yeah, working in an ethical way. That's important, yeah. Like Sangharakshita makes the point, if you work in an abattoir and you're killing cows all day, yeah, what's your state of mind going to be like? Probably not great. And he makes the point that a lot of people, well, men, that work in abattoirs, the rate of mental illness is just beyond, and they can only do that for like 2 years. Yeah, that's like an extreme case of unethical work, you might say. Yeah, it makes you crazy, killing all these animals. So that's the opposite. I'm not going to go into what could be right livelihood, but you can all imagine for yourself. Moksharati's training as a nurse. To me, that sounds like a right livelihood. Yeah, it's like. Also, though, there's definitely an emphasis on working together. So there was a lot of Buddhist businesses, restaurants, people growing businesses out of selling things in a marketplace into like multi-million-pound businesses. Really incredible, yeah? Unfortunately, it's more difficult these days because things are much more specialized. You can't just rock up like people did with like 10 dues to a hospital and say, yeah, we're gardeners, we can look after your garden, and then go, yeah, fine, you know. They did that. You can't do that these days. You need certification, you need whole... But it's really important. So most of our life is spent working, right? So it's a good idea to try and get a hold of that, isn't it? And I was having a walk with a chap called Fabio, who's a lovely guy. I think he's in his late 20s. And he said a lot of his people in his generation don't want to have kids. And that made me sad. You know, they don't want to have kids because of like the state of this world and what kind of world would bring children into. Yeah. And I thought something like this, being involved in taking like direct action in something as basic as livelihood has all sorts of ramifications that can change people's attitudes, and I've seen that myself, change people's energy. You can be a bit kind of slumped and unhappy, but you start working together with other people in a project where you believe in what you're doing, and you kind of can go to bed at night feeling like, actually that was good. Regardless of what happened during the day and all the ups and downs, this was a good thing to do, yeah? And I'm putting my energy, my life force into something that's benefiting other people, yeah? So that's another emphasis, yeah? And there's a number of different right livelihood businesses, and I hope more spring up. I'm sure they will, actually. I'm pretty oddly confident about that. I don't know why. Okay, the last one, number 6, we're here. Spiritual friendship, yeah? It has a beautiful name, Kalyana Mitrata, yeah? Kalyana can mean, spiritual is not a good word, is it? It's a bit like vague and at the same time emotive, you know, it's a bit sentiment, I don't know, but it's the only word we have. But Kalyana can mean beautiful, yeah? But spiritual friendship, it's a real emphasis in this particular movement and order, and I think it's something for me that was immediately tangible. As soon as I came in, it was like, oh, there was something different. And well, there's a quote from the Buddha that Sangharakshita emphasized, in which we say a lot. But the Buddha himself said, spiritual friendship is the whole of the spiritual life. Yeah, that has all sorts of ramifications about what the nature of it. If you're looking to be enlightened as well, it obviously means enlightenment is not just a personal issue. There's a kind of transpersonal aspect to it. So if spiritual friendship is the whole of the spiritual life, it doesn't just mean that we need each other in this messed up world, I should say, but we need each other in order to make progress. It also means, in terms of the fruit, what we're doing is transpersonal. Yeah, there's something transpersonal about this. And I have to say, this is one of the points of this particular order that I really appreciate. I've got many friends in this room, many friends back in the UK, in fact in different parts of the world. And I know that I will be friends with them until I die. That's a very strange thing, but it's not always like that, is it? So it's like there's a kind of common set of values and principles that keeps people together that you can grow with through all your ups and downs. You can grow with in time, yeah. And it's something really emphasized in this particular order. And we have this beautiful thing called a Kalyana Mitra ceremony, yeah? So people sometimes they've been coming for a long time, and we do this little ritual, we do a ritual where we ritually take on 2 spiritual friends that are kind of older than you or senior to you, yeah? And if I think about these 2 people in my life, they completely changed my life. I was talking about my friend Janananda last week, who's passed away, but for me, being friends with him was an exemplification. I learnt more by being friends with this person than 90% of the books I was reading. Yeah, It was much more straightforward. It was like, oh, this is what it means to practice the Dharma. One minute he's outside pouring concrete onto the floor, and I don't know what he's doing, like fixing things and doing. The next minute he's talking to someone whose parents have just died. Dynamic, dignity. Yeah, I thought, oh, this tells you something about the nature of what it is to practice. Yeah. Yeah, and maybe I just my other Kalyana Mitra, his name's Kevla. He was like the first person that I could say anything to. Yeah, to me it sounds obvious now that I have people in my life that I can literally say anything to from the weirdest, darkest recesses of my mind. They don't need to be my kind of psychotherapist. They don't need to tell me that I'm not insane. They're just friends, yeah. But it didn't used to be like that. And unfortunately, with a lot of people, it's not. Yeah, obviously you have to be appropriate. Some people are a bit inappropriate. They go and tell you everything, right? But it's so important to have people that you can actually just talk to about anything, the weirdest kind of stuff. So, and anyway, he just befriended me. Yeah, so that was the reason I think a lot of us are here, or at least the reason I'm here, is basically due to friendships. Yeah, and at the time I just thought it was him. Yeah, and it was, but it's everybody. There's an emphasis of this particular order, which I love. There's a altruistic, outreaching dimension. Yeah, which is really important. I had something good to say about this, but it's left me. Oh yeah, that's it. Well, maybe this is good. But I was thinking, okay, so that's the 6 emphases, and it can all sound a bit whatever, and it highlights the fact that this is actually a tradition, it is actually a thing, it's an order, it's not just a random thing. But I was thinking the people that I've got on with best, and the people, like my favorite order members, are not group people, funnily enough. We've all got cases, we're all doing this thing together, but they're not group people. They're not like groupie kind of, this is the in thing, the clique. I get this allergic react. Maybe I'm a bit OTT with that, but I get, as soon as that starts happening, I'll just feel like weird, and I don't want to be. So then I don't do anything. But they're not group people, and I think that's because Sangharakshita really emphasized the transition from being what you might call a herd member, a group member, into an individual or a true individual, yeah? So he equates being an individual with kind of what you might call a spiritual development, yeah? Not individualist, not like I'm just going to wear the craziest clothes to be completely different, and not in opposition to anyone else, but becoming autonomous, like an individual yourself, is probably the only way you can actually be in a collective healthily. Yeah, if you just got a load of people trying to be individuals, it's boring. Yeah, it's just a bit eccentric, and then it just fizzles out. If you have a load of people just trying to be group members, well, we know what happens. You end up in a cultic kind of situation, and it's just a bit. You're squashed. You're squashed by the group. Yeah, so there's a real emphasis within this order and movement. When you're talking about spiritual friendship, is about being an individual within a group as well, or being an individual within a collective, yeah? Which is why I think it works. So, that's all I want to say. So, yeah, these 6 emphases. The first one is going for refuge, yeah? The Buddha, essentially, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha being the refuge. Not a place, not a literal place, but a liberated consciousness. Yeah, that is possible, and that we get flavors of step by step in our own practice of the Dharma. We get intimations, and we get like a little guiding star, and we're going in a direction. So you're going somewhere. Yeah, you can feel it in your own experience. That's important. Yeah, so it's going for refuge, a unified order. Yeah, so no one's ordination is worth more than anyone else's. Man, woman, age, doesn't matter. Yeah, it's down to your own integrity and energy that you put in. Ecumenical Buddhism, basically not being aligned specifically with, say, Tibetan Buddhism or Theravadan Buddhism, but basically having a system of practice that has evolved from the founder, our founder, Sangharajta, that may use different elements depending on the culture, an appropriate practice for the culture we're living in right now, yeah. Number 4, right livelihood, yeah, working together, very, very, very important, or just ethical work. Number 5, the arts, the importance of arts in your life, yeah, either being creative yourself or at least livening up your consciousness by listening and viewing art, yeah. And number 6, Kalyana Mitrata, spiritual friendship. And yeah, that's by the way of a kind of introduction to Triratna, to this order, this movement, which we will be celebrating tomorrow at the Waterborg, our retreat centre. So you're very welcome to come to that. You can talk to me or talk to Kirill or whoever looks competent. I don't know who that is, but talk to somebody about that if you want to come tomorrow. Yeah, and I'll just finish just by emphasizing what Kirill was talking about, dana. Yeah, dana being translated as generosity, and that's what we're trying to do with this place. In terms of right livelihood, we're trying to create a culture where everybody can give freely. Yeah, whether it's your time, your energy, and we also need money. And I'll quote Dharmasara again from the other week, which is very good. It's quite obvious, but, well, maybe not, but dana, generosity, doesn't mean free, yeah, and it doesn't mean cheap. That said, if you consciously don't want to give any money, good for you, fantastic, yeah? Don't give any money. And if you don't have any money, don't give any money. But just be aware that everything is given freely, and we're trying to create a culture of abundance between us, especially in this day and age, yeah? Just to kind of create a kind of energy between us, abundance. So there'll be someone with a dana bowl by the door, and there's a card reader, and that will do. Have a nice weekend.